Number 9. Ryan Perez. Ryan Perez was a Philadelphia police officer with an impeccable record. The 30-year-old had been on the force for 5 years without any complaints being made against him. But his squeaky clean record didn't stop him from losing his job recently over a fight he got into with his neighbor back in 2019. As a cop, Perez had experience handling disputes between neighbors, but he apparently failed to peacefully resolve a disagreement that resulted in him being charged with public intoxication, criminal mischief, and disorderly conduct. The officer allegedly broke his neighbor's window during the off-duty incident. A police spokesperson confirmed that Perez had been suspended with intent to dismiss, but wouldn't give many details about the case. A source familiar with the situation told local papers that the fight happened after an ongoing dispute between Perez and his neighbor reached its tipping point. Perez hired a lawyer and is fighting to clear his name and get his job back. The police department had made it clear that the commissioner is standing by his decision to fire the former officer, who he believes violated policy with his unbecoming conduct. Number 8. Luana Valeria Salazar Zamora. 23-year-old Luana Zamora vanished in the Costa Rican province of Cartago in June of last year. She was last seen with a young man from her neighborhood named Kenneth Mejia, who claims he parted ways with her at a local mall. When Luana's family didn't hear from her, they knew something was wrong. It was totally unlike her to go silent for long periods and did not keep them updated on her whereabouts. Meanwhile, just days after her disappearance, Mejia skipped town. The family pleaded with the police to investigate some leads, but law enforcement was slow to move on the case. Feeling like they had no other choice than to take matters into their own hands, Luana's loved ones began their own search for her. The young woman's brother, Jose Zamora, noticed a suspicious patch of freshly disturbed ground outside the house Mejia lived in with his grandmother before fleeing the law. He began to dig and unearthed a bag with Luana's body inside. She had been stabbed to death. Kenneth Mejia was found guilty of homicide and received a 19-year prison sentence. Number 7. Dean Keller versus Jeffrey Viagel. Indianapolis firefighter Dean Keller and his wife had lived in their Greenwood, Indiana home for years when their new neighbor, Jeffrey Viagel, moved in next door. The two men got along fine for a while, but that all changed one day in 2009. Keller was outside training the family's puppy when Viagel accused him of being on his property. Viagel also seemed bothered to learn that Keller was a military veteran. 15 police reports were filed over the next 8 years as tensions continued to escalate between the neighbors. On one occasion, the Kellers accused Viagel of luring their dogs over to his yard and threatening to kill them. Another time, Viagel claimed that Keller's dog had run into his yard and bitten him. Things came to blows when Viagel allegedly pulled a knife on Keller's dog. They wrestled each other to the ground as Keller tried to get the knife out of Vigel's hand. Both men were arrested for battery, but the charges were dropped. The verbal confrontations continued and were often peppered with threats of violence from Viagel. He allegedly threw firecrackers at the Keller's dogs, spat on Dean, swung a baseball bat at him, stabbed him with a fork, and more. Concerned for his family's safety, Keller installed a security camera facing Vigel's property. The long-standing feud reached a boiling point in 2017 when the two men exchanged words from across the fence that separated their yards. Viagel pulled a gun. Before he could shoot, Keller pulled his own gun out and fired 11 rounds. Jeff was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but survived. Police determined that Keller acted in self-defense and arrested Viagel. He pled guilty to criminal recklessness and was sentenced to time served. The police were called one more time after that, but it appears as though the neighbors have finally learned to leave each other alone. Number 6. Kenneth Hoyle and Bobby Depal. 69-year-old Kenny Hoyle and his wife initially got along with Bobby Depal and August Dempsey, the 40-something couple who lived next door to them in Philadelphia's Frankford neighborhood. But when Bobby decided to build a large shed on his small property, Hoyle reported him for not having the proper permit. The city fined Bobby and ordered him to take the shed down, but he fought the case. In the meantime, he had an explosive outburst and threatened to kill Hoyle, only to act perfectly pleasant the next day, as if nothing had happened. It became clear that Bobby, who had an alleged history of alcohol abuse, was getting out of hand with his drinking again. Bobby won his appeal to keep his shed, and Kenny was outraged. He made a habit of calling the cops on Bobby over trivial matters, and their confrontations became even more heated. Everyone involved in the rivalry became miserable as the war took over their lives. Hoyle accused Bobby of throwing a cinder block through his car window, dumping a bucket full of maggots on his porch, and poisoning his dog to death. Bobby adamantly denied killing the dog, but did whatever he could to try getting his neighbor to move. He blared music, shined bright lights into Hoyle's home, and destroyed Kenny's fence in a booze-fueled campaign of destruction. Hoyle came to the police, but they were unable to rush to the scene because they were dealing with another serious crime. In the early hours of the morning, he dialed 911 again and told the dispatcher that he shot and killed Bobby in August. He initially tried claiming that he acted in self-defense, but surveillance footage showed that the couple was unarmed when he opened fire on them. The senior citizen was found guilty of murdering the pair and received a 66-year prison sentence. What would you do if your relationship with your neighbors turned violent? Would you move? Let us know in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 5. Former cop turned criminal. Mark and Diane Xander hoped to be friends with their new neighbors, Pete and Barbara Richter. Pete was a former Baltimore police officer who had built a home for retirement in Stevensonville, Maryland. The Xanders saw the couple outside one day and introduced themselves. It seemed like they were going to get along just fine. Someone vandalized the Richters' home before they even moved in, causing $20,000 worth of damage. When Pete heard that Mark and another resident had been seen peering in one of his windows, he accused Xander of committing the crime. There was no evidence of Mark being responsible, and nobody was arrested in the case. The Xanders chalked the situation up to a misunderstanding and vowed to continue trying to get along with the Richters. But Pete clung to his anger. He made enemies with several other neighbors, often complaining about slight disturbances that members of the community were tolerant of, like loud music, teens playing sports and riding ATVs outside, and a truck driver parking his semi on the street on weekends. In 2001, the Xanders' house mysteriously burned down. Investigators were unable to determine its origins. The family suspected Pete of arson, but loved their neighborhood too much to leave. Even though other residents were starting to move to get away from the Richters, they rebuilt the house. The animosity went on for 14 years. One day, Pete lured the Xanders' dog into his yard. Mark went to retrieve the dog and was accused of trespassing. He was trying to leave when Richter pulled out a gun and shot him twice in the back. Richter claimed that he shot Mark in self-defense, but a jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. He's currently serving a 25-year prison sentence. Number 4. Eric Martin Hilderbrand. A lot of neighborly rivalries that got out of hand started over petty disagreements and escalate into full-blown war. In October of last year, Anita Braddock complained to code enforcement about her neighbor's bright light shining into her home at night. An officer visited the property and found that 62-year-old Timothy Patch and his wife, Rhonda, were indeed violating a county code that bans disruptive outdoor lighting. The couple received a warning and were given 2 weeks to correct the problem. When they failed to heed the order, they received another warning, letting them know that they could incur fines of up to $1,000 per day if they don't do what they were told. They finally listened and turned off the light. Anita, who lived with her 61-year-old brother, Eric Martin Hilderbrand, emailed officials to let them know that the problem had been remedied. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. Just weeks later, Patch and Hilderbrand got into an argument outside their homes. Hilderbrand shot and killed Patch in his driveway, then went home and turned the gun on himself. A neighbor told local news station that both men had lived in the community for less than a year, and police confirmed that neither resident had ever filed a criminal complaint against the other. Nobody went into detail about what caused things to boil over, but family members said that the dispute leading up to the rivalry was about more than just a light. Number 3. Landlord lashes out. 61-year-old Ellen Wink found herself feeling fed up last year when her tenant stopped paying his rent on the room he rented in her Norwalk, Connecticut home. The landlord and former city clerk told 54-year-old Kurt Lametta, who had lived at the home for 2 years, that she was selling the house and he had to move. But Lametta didn't leave, and the two became embroiled in a bitter back and forth as Wink became increasingly frustrated with the situation. She was arrested in September after allegedly taking all of Lametta's belongings to the dump and illegally locking him out of the home. The exasperated landlord had no choice but to let him back in. The ongoing drama reached a whole new level recently when Wink fatally shot Lametta at the residence. She dialed 911 and told the operator that Lametta had come after her because she was cleaning up. According to court documents, she told officers at the scene that her tenant had been driving her nuts. Wink is being held on a $1 million bond for murder. Her lawyer told news outlets that the defense is exploring multiple options, including self-defense. Number 2. Racist Rampage. Jennifer McLegan is a nurse and single mom who lives in the Valley Stream suburb of Long Island, New York. After moving into her home in 2017, dog dew and dead squirrels began appearing in her yard. Someone also kept firing a pellet gun into her lawn. She suspected that her neighbor, 57-year-old John McEnany, was behind the disturbing acts. For 3 years, the man and his girlfriend, who were white, had embarked on a cruel campaign of intimidation against McLegan, who was African American. She told reporters that the couple told her and other black residents to go back to where they came from, brandish guns, and wore blackface as a way to taunt her. Police were aware of the situation and had responded to numerous calls about the harassment, but McLegan became frustrated because they didn't seem to be doing much about her complaints. She posted large signs outside her house describing what was happening to her. Upon learning of the situation, community members and activists joined together and marched through the neighborhood in support of McLegan. She finally caught McEnany in the act after installing a surveillance camera, and he was arrested. His girlfriend, 53-year-old Mindy Kanarick, was also charged for her alleged role in the crimes. Kanarick agreed to undergo diversity and inclusion training in exchange for a 1-year conditional discharge. McEnany pled guilty to criminal mischief and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. He had to complete anti-racism training, and the judge issued an order of protection, banning the couple from contact with McLegan. Hopefully, this marks the end of her long, drawn-out battle for the right to live peacefully and safely. And number 1. Justin James Ludington. People will go to some crazy extremes when they're desperate to get rid of a neighbor they don't want to get along with. Some try to harass the rival resident into moving, while others resort to murder. And sometimes they burn their enemy's house down. Late last year, police in Lake Okeechobee, Florida, responded to a call about a house fire. They found the home engulfed in flames as firefighters battled to put the blaze out. The homeowner carried her disabled mother-in-law outside, and they both thankfully survived. But the house and everything in it was destroyed, along with the 2 vehicles in the driveway. Witnesses told detectives that they had seen the neighbor, Justin James Ludington, hitting the home with a hammer and threatening to burn it down. He had allegedly set some wood pallets on fire outside and calmly walked away, saying, "Let it burn." Community members said that Ludington and the victims had been entangled in a long-standing dispute, but nobody elaborated on the details. The suspect turned himself into the sheriff and was charged with first-degree arson of an occupied structure and 2 counts of second-degree arson of a vehicle. He's been held on $70,000 bail while the case waits to play out in court. The victims told reporter Diane Sawyer that the flames were tall, bright, and spreading fast when they fled the home. Even though they had lost everything, they knew that they were lucky to be alive.
Number 10. Mexican tarantulas. In 2011, Swiss customs officers spotted some very suspicious boxes on an inbound flight. The boxes were so suspicious that they assumed they were stuffed with drugs, and so they cut them open to check. But it wasn't drugs stashed inside the boxes. It was tarantulas. Yes, the big freaky spiders. The officials discovered 261 tarantulas being smuggled into the country, each one packed in its own plastic bag. These were Mexican red-kneed tarantulas, mildly poisonous to humans. The toxic insects can grow to be over 6 inches long and have a lifespan of up to 30 years. The shipment had been destined for an unidentified Swiss tarantula dealer sent from the Dominican Republic. Once they reached the dealer, they would have been distributed throughout Europe to potential buyers. 10 of the spiders were already dead from the trauma of having to fly across the world. The rest were still alive and were handed over to veterinarians for safekeeping. But the story didn't end at the airport. authorities tracked down the dealer's house and discovered an entire tarantula farm. There were over 665 illegal spiders on the property, as well as 72 flesh-eating centipedes. It was a house of absolute horror. The 261 tarantulas would have been sold on the black market for over $11,000. Number 9. The iPhone Smuggler. Smuggling iPhones is a surprisingly lucrative business, especially in China. But one woman in particular went above and beyond. Instead of bringing just 1 or 2 phones into the country to make some quick bucks, she decided to strap approximately 102 iPhones directly to her body. But, as with most things, getting greedy did not pay off. The female Iron Man, as she was named by the local press, was caught when officials in Shenzhen noticed her body didn't quite look right. She wasn't just frumpy, she was frumpy in all the wrong places. Airport security was suspicious that she was wearing so many layers of clothes, considering how hot it was outside. She also didn't seem to be properly proportioned. Her arms and legs were extremely thin, but her torso was bulky in an unnatural way. So they decided they needed to do an investigation. They pulled the woman aside and made her take off some articles of clothing. They discovered she had 4 layers of iPhones wrapped around her waist and torso. Each phone was sealed in plastic, and the entire bundle weighed about 44 pounds. She had been limping around the airport like an Oompa Loompa from all the weight strapped to her chest. Along with the phones, airport security also confiscated 15 luxury watches. Why did she do this? Phones cost upwards of 30% more in China than they do in America. You can purchase a phone and sell it in China at 20% more and still make a tidy profit. Number 8. Smuggling herself. Customs officials in Turkey discovered something unbelievable in March of 2015. Officials at this border crossing of Sarpi became suspicious of a 25-year-old man and demanded a look inside his suitcase. What they discovered inside was a 22-year-old woman curled inside like a baby in a womb. There was a literal person in the suitcase, trying to smuggle herself into the country. She was a native of Georgia, the country, not the state, and she had done something most people only joke about. I think we've all been going somewhere interesting and had a friend say, "Hey, why don't you take me along in your suitcase?" Nobody ever actually does it, except apparently this woman. In the end, the woman and her friend, also from Georgia, were arrested, processed, and sent straight back to their own country. They were also ordered never to return. Number 7. Baby in the carryon. Jennifer Talbot was arrested in September of 2019 for trying to smuggle a baby in her carry-on luggage. She's now facing life in jail. Let's break this story down piece by piece because it's honestly astonishing. Jennifer is an American woman, and she tried to bring a baby onto the plane that was only 6 days old. Jennifer, a native of Ohio, basically tried to kidnap an infant from the Philippines and bring it back to America with her. She was accused by the Philippine authorities of violating anti-trafficking laws, as well as legislation which protects children against abuse and exploitation. This is what the Philippines National Bureau of Investigation said in a statement. Jennifer has no criminal record in the United States, but that doesn't matter to the Filipino authorities. This is arguably the worst country to be caught breaking the law in. This is the same country where drug dealers are often shot on sight and murdered. Jennifer is now facing a fine of up to $96,000, as well as life imprisonment. She had put the baby in her carry-on in an attempt to bring it back home, where she already had 5 children waiting for her. But Jennifer hadn't actually been trying to kidnap the child. She had taken it from its biological mother with her permission. The mother was apparently a friend of Jennifer's brother's ex-girlfriend. Jennifer simply wanted to take the baby away and give it a better life in America, as its biological mother seemed to be having issues raising it. Still, you can't just sneak a baby onto a plane and you carry on luggage, and now Jennifer is paying the ultimate price. Number 6. Colombian cocaine. 5 female drug smugglers were busted at a Colombian airport trying to sneak a massive quantity of cocaine out of the country. This happened in early 2022 when police became suspicious of one of these smugglers who happened to be pretending to be pregnant. She had a fake baby bump, and it caught the attention of one of the officials in the security screening area at the Ernesto Cortizos International Airport. The woman was pulled aside for a secondary inspection at which point officers found bundles of cocaine wrapped around her abdomen. They were positioned in such a way that she was supposed to look pregnant, but it was very obviously fake. The flight was temporarily grounded while officers tracked down her companions. They discovered that the other 4 women also had cocaine packages strapped to their bellies. One of them had tried to remove the bundles in the bathroom but was busted in the act. In total, the authorities managed to seize 14 giant bricks of cocaine. Number 5. 52 reptiles. A man tried to sneak past the United States border agents in California with 52 snakes and lizards hidden inside his clothing. He was driving across the San Isidro border on February 25, 2022, in a truck when the Customs and Border Protection agents decided to make him pull over for an additional inspection. There was just something about this man that didn't quite sit right with them. What the agents discovered was a collection of small bags, each one holding a live reptile. But this guy wasn't stashing them in a secret compartment in his truck, not under the seat or in the glove box. He had all the reptiles concealed on his person, stashed in his jacket, in his pants pockets, and stuffed inside his pants against his skin. The individual, identified only as a 30-year-old citizen of the US, had 9 snakes and 43 horned lizards on him. All of these were seized, as they're all considered endangered species. But perhaps the more shocking part is that the man had the courage to have all these reptiles on him at the same time. Most people wouldn't be able to handle sitting in a truck with a live snake, never mind having them squiggling around in their pockets. Number 4. The dead passenger. In 2010, 2 women walked into the John Lennon Airport in Liverpool with a man named Kurt Willie Durant. The man was 91 years old, and the women, one of them his wife and the other his stepdaughter, had him sitting in a wheelchair with sunglasses covering his face. They were at the airport to catch a flight to Berlin. They also happened to be traveling with 2 young children. But here's the deal. The man in the wheelchair was dead, and the women knew it. They took a taxi to the airport and were sure to tell the employees once they arrived that the man was old, frail, and extremely tired. He didn't want to be bothered. But to everyone looking at him, it was pretty clear that he wasn't alive at all. There's just something about a dead body that really gives off creepy grave vibes. The women pushed the dead man in his wheelchair all the way up to the window to get ready to board their plane, and that was as far as they ever got. The woman who was working at the desk, Leah Gandhi, said shivers went down her spine when she realized she was looking at a dead body in the middle of the bustling airport. The family was asked to step into a side room. There, a doctor confirmed that the man was dead. Both the women were arrested. It turned out they were trying to bring the man back to Germany to be buried and didn't want to deal with the bureaucratic headache of death certificates and specialized transport. They thought it would be easier to purchase him a seat on the plane and simply smuggle his corpse into Germany. Turns out, not so simple. Number 3. The fake wig. In the summer of 2019, a man tried to enter Spain with a serious amount of cocaine glued to his head. It was definitely one of the more ingenious smuggling attempts, though it failed spectacularly. He was busted by the police at the Barcelona International Airport when he arrived from Colombia. He had half a kilogram, or just over 1 pound of cocaine, underneath his wig. When the suspect got off his flight from Bogota, officers noted that he was extremely nervous. But his nervousness alone wasn't what got him caught. Police at the airport thought it was strange that his wig was so high off his head. It didn't look natural, or at least, it didn't look like a wig that someone would voluntarily put on their head. It was huge and ridiculous. When they asked the man to take his wig off, they found a packet of cocaine stuck to his scalp. He'd glued the thing right to the top of his skull, where he was actually bald. Spain is one of the main points of entry in Europe for Colombian cocaine. Spain itself is an extremely popular destination for Colombians, and so it makes smuggling drugs across the border less suspicious. Authorities in Barcelona find drugs stashed on people in all kinds of creative ways. On one occasion, they found a Colombian man with drugs strapped to his abdomen and 35 condoms filled in his stomach. And 4 years before this happened, a woman was arrested at the airport in Madrid for having cocaine sewn into her wig. At the same airport, a different woman was discovered with nearly 3 pounds of blow hidden inside her breast implants. Number 2. 94 phones. Again with the phones. This time it was a man, and he had 94 iPhones strapped to his body, when he tried to cross the border into mainland China from Hong Kong. It happened in 2015, and his story is pretty similar to the woman we talked about earlier. As we already know, having nearly 100 phones strapped to your body makes you look a little misshapen. The man was immediately suspicious to the customs inspectors when they saw he was walking strangely. He was traveling light, yet he blundered along like somebody with an extra 40 pounds strapped to his chest. The metal detector went off, and the man was searched. The authorities found the phones strapped to him with duct tape, covering his chest, crotch, and his thighs. In total, his collection of iPhone 5s and 6s would have netted him a profit of around $50,000 if he hadn't gotten caught. Number 1. A fishy scarf. A Vietnamese man tried to enter Australia with a fish strapped to his neck. The unnamed Vietnamese national, 34 years old, arrived at the Adelaide airport from Malaysia in April of 2019. He was selected to have his baggage examined. When the Australian Border Force officers didn't find anything mysterious in his luggage, they decided to frisk him. Not wanting to be embarrassed, he admitted right away that he was trying to smuggle something into the country. He opened up his jacket and showed them the bag with the fish in it, draped around his neck like a scaly scarf. It was later identified as a fully red Asian arowana, which is controlled under the International Convention and Trade of Endangered Species. For his daring crime, the man is now facing up to 10 years in prison and a fine that could be as high as $1 million.
10. Stabbing store security. In October of 2020, two sisters went shopping in Chicago. A store security guard asked the sisters nicely if they could please wear their masks. But instead of complying, they had a full mental breakdown. One of the sisters punched the security guard in the face, and the other pulled a knife from her pocket and started stabbing. This was one of the most violent and horrific mask-related incidents of late 2020. The sisters, identified as Jessica and Jayla Hill, were prepped and ready to do something terrible the moment they walked into that store. People don't just erupt like this for no reason. It's as if they had been waiting for something just like this situation to set them off. According to police spokeswoman Carrie James, the guard had done nothing except ask the women to put on their masks and sanitize their hands. It was Jessica Hill who pulled the knife from her pocket and started stabbing the guard in his back and chest, while Jayla held him by his hair so that he couldn't fight back. In the end, the 32-year-old victim was stabbed 27 times and rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Jessica and Jayla were arrested at the scene and taken to jail on attempted murder charges. Last we heard, the security guard did manage to pull through, and the sisters have not yet been let out of jail and are awaiting trial. 9. The ultimate Karen. On January 18, 2021, a woman from Parma Heights in Ohio refused to wear a mask inside a grocery store. It was the same story we were hearing throughout the course of the pandemic. But what makes it truly unique is that her name, the name on her birth certificate, is Karen Turner. It's almost as if she was born to be a Karen in the truest sense. Karen was arrested for trespassing when she refused to leave the grocery store and wouldn't wear a mask. But this woman didn't just refuse to leave, she turned into a full-blown Karen. She argued with a store employee over federal laws as if the person at the cash register had any clue what was happening. And then when the cops pulled her out of the store and put her in the squad car, she started screaming hysterically. She said she was going to sue the police. When they tried to take her purse, she began screeching at the top of her lungs, "Illegal search! Illegal search!" It was all pretty embarrassing. Karen was banned from this particular brand of grocery store for life and had to pay a fine of $573. But the real punishment came from being humiliated in front of the country. 8. Slashing at IHOP. At an IHOP restaurant in Queens, in the same week as the defenseless woman was beaten in an elevator in Brooklyn, A man lashed out at an employee and stabbed them. The situation unfolded on a Tuesday afternoon, all because the customer refused to wear a mask. According to the local police, the suspect was informed he needed to wear a mask as soon as he stepped foot in the restaurant. When he refused, he was asked to leave. As if this guy had been living under a rock for the past year and didn't understand all the rules already in place, he had a huge mental breakdown. He screamed at everyone. He made an enormous scene and then went to fetch a knife. When he came back to the IHOP, he tried to stab one of the male employees. But as he swung the knife, he missed the man and slashed a 40-year-old woman across the arm. The knife cut her so deep that she needed 7 stitches. And here's where things get extremely sad for the second time today. This man was caught on camera in a viral video that has been seen millions of times, stabbing someone at a restaurant. Nevertheless, so far as we know, he hasn't been apprehended by the police. He appears to still be at large. 7. Beating up high school students. It was about halfway through 2021 when a Florida dad beat up a student outside his daughter's high school. The dad was described as hardcore anti-mask, a man named Dan Bauman. According to the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, he was so angry about the high school's mask mandate that he showed up and assaulted a student, as if that could possibly help the situation at all. He has since been charged with aggravated child abuse. The day of the incident was the 5th day since his daughter's school had opened back up. He made sure that his daughter wasn't wearing a mask as he walked her to the front gates of the school. Talk about being embarrassed. Not only did she have to deal with being dropped off at the front door by her embarrassing dad, but she wasn't allowed to wear a mask and had to participate in her father's insanity. As Dan was leading his daughter up to the door, ensuring she would have no friends for the rest of her years in school, he had his phone out filming. That was when another student tried to grab Dan's phone out of his hand. She said she was sick of him doing this every single day since school opened. Well, Dan was sick of it too. He grabbed the girl by her shoulder, snatched her hand, and twisted her arm like he wanted to break it. Luckily for the girl's arm, a security guard stepped in, followed by a police officer. As Dan was being arrested, he screamed about how the mask mandate was illegal and against the Bill of Rights. All his screaming didn't stop him from being carried away in a cop car. 6. Brutal elevator attack. On November 13, 2020, a woman was brutally attacked in an elevator. Why? She simply asked a couple, also in the elevator, if they could please put on their masks. It was a pretty reasonable request considering the time and place and what was happening, but the couple was not having any of it. They were so personally offended by being asked to cover their faces that they turned on the woman, who happened to be 60 years old. They struck her in the face and legs, knocked her down, and beat her. She had to be treated at a nearby hospital. Thankfully, the woman did make a full recovery. However, the hoodlums responsible for the attack also made a flawless getaway. The male and female, both estimated to be between 16 and 20 years of age, fled the apartment and have never been caught. So far as we know, they got away clean with beating an old lady on video and in broad daylight in Brooklyn. 5. 10 years for fighting. A man in Iowa was sentenced to spend 10 years in prison after a disturbing outburst at a store in Des Moines. It was November 11, 2020. Shane Michael walked into the Vision for Less eyewear store wearing his face mask like a diaper, with his nose fully exposed. Another customer asked Michael politely if he could correct the position of his mask. After exchanging some heated words, the other customer decided to avoid the situation and leave, but Michael followed him into the parking lot and viciously attacked him with his fists. He bashed him in the eye, kneed him in the groin, and then pulled his mask completely down and spat in his face. He also yelled, "If I have it, you have it." When he was arrested, Michael tried to play it off like he wasn't the attacker. But according to eyewitnesses and employees at the Vision Center, Michael did indeed instigate the entire thing. Michael was charged with assault causing bodily injury. And here's where things got crazy ironic. In February of 2021, Michael was offered a plea deal that would have resulted in only 2 years of probation and no jail time. All he needed to do was plead guilty. He refused, rejected the offer, and took his case to a jury. He ended up getting 10 years in prison instead of 2 years of probation, all because he was stubborn and didn't want to admit he had done something illegal and morally reprehensible. Now he won't be out of prison until he's in his 50s. 4. The pilot and the flight attendant. A pilot for Southwest Airlines got into a fight with a flight attendant over mask rules. The incident happened in October of 2021 at a bar in San Jose. The pilot and the attendant started talking about face masks. The discussion became heated and the pilot physically assaulted the attendant. However, the police and the airline have managed to keep the incident pretty hushed. We know the pilot was put on leave, but nobody has been able to get his name. We also don't know just how far he took the assault or how badly the attendant was beat up. That being said, it wasn't the first time a flight attendant was on the wrong side of somebody's fist. Just a few months earlier, a flight attendant was attacked by a passenger and had 2 teeth punched out. The assault was just one of 477 incidences on Southwest flights from April 8th to May 15th. If you thought being out on the streets was dangerous during the pandemic, you should have tried flying anywhere with Southwest Airlines and their disgruntled, maskless passengers. 3. Tragedy in Germany. It was a dark day from Germany in September of 2021 when a man walked into a gas station and shot the clerk in the face. The clerk was just 20 years old, and all he had done to warrant his murder was ask the customer to wear a face mask. Because this happened in Germany, privacy laws have prevented the police from releasing the names of those involved. What we do know is that the suspect was 49 years old and that he told the police he was fed up with pandemic-related rules. He was so frustrated that when he walked into the gas station, picked up a 6-pack of beer, and went to the counter, he had a gun tucked in his pocket in case anyone gave him a hard time. When the young clerk, a student who had his whole life ahead of him, asked that he put a mask on, things turned very quickly. The killer pulled out the gun, pointed it straight at the young clerk's face, and pulled the trigger. Tragically, the clerk was dead instantly. The killer was arrested immediately afterwards and will likely be facing life in prison. 2. Fractures at Staples. Margot Kagan was at her local Staples doing some shopping in summer of 2020 when she had her leg broken. Of course, she didn't fall over and break the leg herself. It was the result of a vicious attack by another customer who refused to put a mask on. It happened on July 29th as Margot, a mother of 2, was faxing paperwork using the store's machine. She had recently had a liver transplant and was very worried about catching the virus from somebody and dying from medical complications. So it was that a maskless customer walked by, and Margot said she didn't appreciate being put in danger. Instead of being respectful and putting her mask on, or even just avoiding the situation, Terry Thomas threw the frail, still healing woman to the ground, which broke her tibia. Terry was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, and Margot sued Staples. In her suit, Margot claims she was left vulnerable because the store lacked supervision and adequate security. 1. No mask heart attack. A man in Australia suffered a heart attack in the middle of being arrested back in summer of 2021. He was being put under arrest for refusing to wear a mask while exercising outdoors. He wasn't even inside bothering anybody, but simply exercising at the Brisbane Botanical Gardens with his partner on a Monday morning. This is one of those cases where somebody citing health issues actually had health issues. When the police asked why he wasn't wearing his covering, he told the officers he suffered from heart problems and had issues breathing. This made him exempt from the mandate. especially while exercising in the great outdoors. Having dealt with so many Karens, the police didn't even bother to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. They dismissed him as being a liar and then put him in handcuffs. Seconds later, he fell to the ground and cried out in pain while having a seizure. He tried desperately to search for medicine in his bag as the police held him on the ground like he was the worst serial killer in history. He had been peaceful throughout the whole ordeal and was then bullied by the police and practically stepped on while he thrashed on the ground uncontrollably. Would you rather have to wear a mask for another year or get 2 more vaccine shots? Let us know which you find more of an inconvenience in the comments, and thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button before you go, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.